Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. So I'm Deepthik. So I'm a recent graduate from NIT Trichy. I graduated last year, batch of 2020. I majored in electrical engineering, although I found my calling with cybersecurity since my first year of college. So that we help all of you pave a good path to how to start a career in cybersecurity and also help you understand what it would actually take and a possible roadmap as well, how you can actually get into the field. So yeah, all right. So yeah, we'll get right to it. So yeah, this is the agenda we're hoping to cover today. So firstly, we'll just be going through an intro of the domain of cybersecurity, what it entails, and various definitions of it, and how we can break it down into various subdomains as well. And then we'll be talking about a few niches to cybersecurity, like how every specialization in the field of computer science has various subtopics to it. We'll just be going through that. And after that, we'll be talking about how you can possibly find your calling in a specific niche and how you can identify which forte that you would be most comfortable with. And then we'd be looking at a sample career roadmap of how we can enter the industry, be it a company or an academic point in your career, and then how to build up on top of it. And then, of course, we'll be going through skills and resources that would help you along the way immensely. And then we'd also be concluding with how you can build the right mindset, in order to facilitate your career and your basic scope in cybersecurity per se. And then in the end, we of course be taking questions from all of you, and also please feel free to interrupt me at any point in time, and I would be happy to answer questions along the way as well. So right off the bat, I don't want to bore you guys with a lot of text, so let's just kick it off with a small video clip.
The Stuxnet virus, or worm, which is a kind of self-replicating virus, was something that was launched by the US and Israel against the nuclear facilities at Natanz in Iran. And what it was designed to do, and what made it so remarkable, is it made the leap from the virtual to the real. This was computer code that once inside Natanz, it infected something called a programmable logic, a controller, a PLC, and that controlled the centrifuges, which are the things that enrich uranium. So what happened was it took over and it monitored the entire operation for a number of days. And when it was ready, on its own, without any command from the outside, it then launched an attack. And it made the centrifuges spin wildly, either very fast or very slowly, until about 1,000 of them blew apart. There's part of me that believes that it was an incredible operation and also a very powerful piece of software that did or may have prevented Israel from bombing Iran, which the United States was terrified about. And this is something I learned in the film. That was really the reason that we participated in the operation. We were terrified that Israel was going to bomb Iran, which would inevitably draw us into a war with Iran. Coming back to the Stuxnet virus, I think the really interesting thing is that, in part due to the actions of one of the actors, in this case, Israel, it escaped from Natanz. It was always supposed to be secret. It escaped and started infecting computers all over the world. And as a result of that, now the blueprint for this kind of weapon is available to everybody. And it set off a kind of cyber weapon arms race that is extremely disquieting because it threatens critical infrastructure all over the world and is being done in secret. The code is actually infecting the machines that operate the other machines. And so now they're shutting down real world devices or devices that are not computers. And that's probably the scary part. So you can imagine water filtration plants suddenly pumping out poison instead of good water. The pernicious aspect of these kinds of cyber weapons is that they are secret. But we do let people know that we actually have nuclear weapons. We have an international set of agreements that limits their use so that the whole world doesn't go up in flames. We understand capability, nuclear capability. And mind you, it took a lot of work to get the government to agree to start talking about that capability. So my takeaway from the film would be that we have to begin to at least start talking about the capability of these weapons, to admit that we developed them, and to begin to start forging some sort of international agreements on their use, or we're all going to go down. And we're going to go down in ways that we won't even know what hit us.
So, Deepanshu, can you hear me? I just want to make sure that my mic is working.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
that,
Yeah. So this video was basically, so this video talks about Stuxnet. Stuxnet is one of the most infamous worms or viruses that was ever there on a really massive scale. This happened about a decade ago. I'm sure some of you must have heard of it, but for those who haven't, so I would say this incident was what caused an advent in the domain of cybercrime and cybersecurity on a really massive geopolitical geopolitical scale, because this involved two or three nation states as a whole, governments, and so forth. So this basically uh, sort of implied that worms and viruses and all the malicious pieces of code that can affect just a computer can actually cause palpable differences, and that can actually cause palpable destruction as well, as opposed to just a local destruction that you see on your specific computer. This can actually target actual industries, and it can affect actual people and actual locations. So I would say this was a really monumental uh, incident that took place, and it's one to be remembered, especially in the field of cybersecurity. And these kind of incidents will only keep going uphill. There is no way that incidents like this will get less possible from now onwards. So it's up to the people in the domain and in the field of computer science to actually try to prevent these things and possibly worse things like these from happening in the future. So having said that, so to begin with, let's get a few facts straight about cybersecurity. A lot of people have confusions with the naming conventions and what it actually means and the various definitions that it surmises. So for the sake of proper definition, let's just say that information security is the broadest term, and cybersecurity comes within it. So information security can essentially mean securing information in any way. It need not be a way that has anything to do with tech. It can be in a very humanly way as well. And cybersecurity would be another part that comes within it that has to do with securing information on the digital level, as opposed to analog or stuff on paper and so forth. And again, within cybersecurity, you have various niches that we'll be covering in the next couple of slides. As you can see in the diagram, network security is one of the most essential and famous ones. And also, so I would say cybersecurity is more of an umbrella term to sort of contrast it with another example. We can take machine learning. So machine learning, as you know, is another specialization inside the field of computer science. But again, machine learning is sort of inextricably linked to a certain set of textbook knowledge that you just need to know, and then you can easily get into that field. But I would say that cybersecurity is not something like that. It actually comprises of various topics under it. Cybersecurity in that specific definition of the word doesn't mean a lot. You would have to you would have to get familiarized with a lot of topics that would come under that specific umbrella term. And as any other specialization goes, it always sits on top of the core CF concepts such as DSN algos and data structures, databases, networks, and so forth. So these are some things that you have to know. There's no getting around it in order to specialize in any field in computer science, not just cybersecurity, but any specialization. So moving on. So the current status quo of cybersecurity in the world, like in terms of the industry and also in terms of the academic community. So as we saw in that video, that was just one example. There have been bigger attacks in much larger scales since when that happened in the year of 2010. So the cost of cybercrime has been increasing in a rapid scale, and it's gone from a point where people could ignore it to a point where we simply cannot even overlook a part of that cost. So it's become a huge liability for any big corporation. So that is the reason why in the last 2, 3, or 4 years, every corporation has invested a lot into expanding their cybersecurity team with the most talented people possible. So so to this, I mean, in this specific time and in this specific year, I would say it is the biggest growth field in the world of computer science. It used to be machine learning in the past couple of years, I would say, but in the last year or so, I am sure that cybersecurity has trumped it in terms of demand and also the scarcity and supply. And so vulnerabilities are basically everywhere, and it just takes the right person and the right knowledge and also the right time for them to be able to find it and exploit it. So it's just waiting there to be found, and it could affect a lot of industries in ways that we can't even imagine. A good example would be a supply chain management field, where any part, so supply chain, as you all know, is a huge chain comprising of various points in that chain where certain things are done. So it's an end-to-end process, and each point in that chain is definitely vulnerable because nowadays every part of every process in every company uses computers and technology and automation. So every point in that supply chain is exploitable. So every point has to be secured as well, because compromising one point can possibly lead to the compromisation of the entire chain. So these all would essentially give a rise in demand to people who know cybersecurity and companies who want to take them in order to secure their tech. So breaking down the various niches. So in terms of taxonomy, I would say you can classify it into like depending on various topics. But I would say the most important ones are the intent. So you can either work as an ethical person who is going into the offensive side. So basically, that would mean you would be an ethical hacker, to put it simply. So you would work on how a system can be compromised, how it can be hacked, and so forth. You would be doing it with the permission of whoever system you're breaking into. And the flip side of it would be defense. So you would be working on how to protect a certain system from various attacks, what possible attacks would happen, and how to secure the entire system end to end. So the offensive people just have, so they can be a good player or a bad player. So if you'd be working for someone, you'd obviously be the good player, but the bad players are the ones who will be taking the exact same tactics but for a malicious intent. So those guys just have to get it right once, and they can cause destruction. But the people who are trying to secure it, they can't afford to depend on luck. They have to make sure that they've covered the entire ground, they've covered all possible aspects, so that no one can even get it right once. That should be the ideal approach to a person working on the defensive side. And now, in terms of context, so there are various applications that cybersecurity can cater to. One of the most important ones is the network context, right? So network security has been around for many decades because the advent of networks and the network layer has been there since the 80s or 90s. So securing that I would say is one of the core aspects to cybersecurity. And off late, we've also been having a lot of web apps and apps, the rise of the use of apps. So app security is another new topic that people have been wanting to get into, and also they would also need it in order for their products to be secure. And a few more contexts are hardware security. So if you take, for example, there's a lot of embedded products nowadays, and there's a lot of IoT products as well. IoT is pretty much everywhere nowadays, in our homes, in our cars, and so forth. So every system like that also has to be secure because they all will be communicating with each other. So those communications have to be secure, and every transmission and reception of every message has to be secure, and so forth. Blockchain is another niche that also requires a lot of security of late, and this would sort of wear off into another direction because this doesn't come under the traditional concepts of hardware or network. So this would be like a very specific niche, if you ask me. And then, so these are the tech aspects of it. You can also go into completely research aspects of it, where you wouldn't have to do a lot of development, but you just have to do a lot of research. And this research would, of course, definitely entail a lot of mathematics. Mathematics is uh, one of one of the core, if not the core, concepts that would be needed in the field of cybersecurity. So, and then branching from that is a lot of topics like cryptography and so on. And you can also go into the management side of cybersecurity. That's also a good career path if you're up for it. So what that would entail is things like writing policies and writing the requirements that a product needs to satisfy in the realm of cybersecurity and so forth. So you just be managing things that need to be done from a managerial perspective. And a few more specific niches that are coming off late, like very off late, are things like automotive security. So nowadays, like there's a rise in automation in cars as well. We have driverless cars, and we have cars with really sophisticated infotainment systems. Tesla would be a very good example, where almost everything inside the dashboard is digital and is controlled by a certain ECU or a CPU, as opposed to the old cars where we didn't have a lot of screens or electric gadget stuff on the dashboard or in the car as such. So given the rise of all that, that needs a lot of cybersecurity as well. I mean, the field of automotive security is what I'm into right now. And to be honest, I didn't even know that existed before I started searching for it. And I actually came up by it quite coincidentally. So that was something that I didn't know that existed, but apparently it's a huge growth field. There's a lot of demand, especially since I would say 2015, when a lot of researchers actually started trying to hack into cars, and they discovered that there are so many vulnerabilities that are waiting to be exploited. Because in the automotive industry, no one really thought of this specific viewpoint. They didn't think that cars could be hacked. But the more gadgets that they started putting into the car, obviously, the more doors it opened to the vulnerabilities that could be exploited. And quantum security is another field that is not that prevalent now, but it's started to be prevalent in the next, I would say, 1 or 2 decades. As you know, quantum computing is something that's still in the research phase, but it started to be sort of in the last stages of development soon. And when that breaks out as something that could actually be utilized, that would lead, I would say, for the lack of a better word, it would lead to a revolution in the field of computer science. And I'm sure that would need a lot of people thinking about how to secure that specific realm as well, because that's an entirely different direction from our traditional computing that we use right now. So that's about the various niches. So now, uh, coming to a very subjective point of view, right? So we've looked at all the textbook stuff. what's out there, what they are, and so on. So how can you actually find what you like? So again, as it goes without saying, you might as well explore everything. Basically dip your toe in everything that you see and see what you like, and then sort of narrow down in the end. And I would also suggest mix and match a lot of niches, because these niches aren't exactly independent of each other. A lot of things would overlap and also come inside each other. Like for example, network security is something that would be a part of everything below that, because networks are a part of pretty much every area in the computer science world. So like that, you can mix and match a lot of things and sort of find your perfect forte that you'll be comfortable in. And I would say start generic and then figure it out as you go. So as in, you can start off as how any beginner would start off. You need not essentially dip your toe in anything right off the bat. You can just start off with the generic CS concept, and then find your way along the right. Like something will just hit you, or you might coincidentally find something that you actually like more than things that you have heard of. That's how I found automotive security. I really didn't have a plan on pursuing that. I just found it quite coincidentally, and I happen to like it a lot. So that's how I found it. So, and then there are things that you can do that would help you on paper, and also these are pretty much mainstream things, right? So, basically involving yourself in internships, projects, hackathons, CTFs. So these are just platforms that are waiting for people to utilize it, right? So these are platforms that would do nothing but help you. It would just be a stepping stone for you to, get yourself more comfortable in so many things in the field of computer science, and also in the field of cybersecurity. So these would, like, when you start to implement something and see the bigger picture, you would actually start to learn way more things that you didn't even know were there out there. So platforms like this can definitely help. And networking, again, it's a huge game changer, not just for cybersecurity, but in anything, right? So especially in the field of cybersecurity, because there are new things that come out every day, and it's really hard for us to keep a track of it just with the help of the internet. So when it's all streamlined, and when it's all being delivered by a certain community, or by a certain person, or by a certain blog, a certain book, that would really help. So making yourself part of a community, or even a part of a small group amongst your friends who have a certain habit of discussing what's new in the field and what's happening, the innovations, and new concepts, new findings, new hacks that happen in the world. So that would just keep jogging your mind and your brain, and you would keep yourself up to date on what's happening, and obviously you will learn a lot. So yeah. And then, so gradually building your profile above your usual software engineering or IT skill set. So if you take the usual degree in computer science in college, for example, it would cover everything in a sort of equal percentage, I would say. Especially nowadays, the curriculum is getting quite better, so they started to include a lot of specializations. There is a lot of emphasis on what you can choose. You can choose a track in machine learning or blockchain or cybersecurity and so on. But at the end of the day, when you finish your course, or when you finish any course online, it need not be college. You would have a certain grounding in all of it. So you would basically have a basic IT skill set, starting from core concepts like DSN algos, and then database structures and so on. So what you would need to do is basically build on top of that. So first things have to be there. The foundation has to be there for sure. Basic math, databases, networking, DSN algos. So these have to be there. There is no going around it. There is no circumventing it. You have to be strong in these, and there is no two ways around that. And after that, what you can do is, so you can directly, you know, target towards a specific niche inside cybersecurity and start building your way, which might be hard for some people. Or you can, before that, a certain step before that and your basics would be to, route your context towards cybersecurity. So let's say you're an app developer, you can still continue in app developing, but you can just make sure that the context sort of inclines towards cybersecurity. So in that sense, what you would be doing is you would still be dealing with your basic computer science or app developer skill set, but then you'll be doing that for a specific purpose, and that purpose would be cybersecurity. So in that sense, you would learn how what you're doing is starting to affect that field. So you would start to, learn the causation of how, like, what you're doing is actually turning out to be something else and helping or actually becoming a product in that field of cybersecurity. Basically seeing the larger picture. So let's say you're working on a very, very specific component, and you're a part of a team, and when all the components from that entire team is being assembled into one general product, and that product is aimed to target the realm of cybersecurity. So you know how each component works and how it's all being assembled, and how each component is basically being contributed to the larger picture. And the next step would be, of course, to directly get into that field and doing stuff that directly impacts things like cryptography, or actually being a security engineer, as opposed to being a software engineer in a cybersecurity company. That would be a good way of explaining it simply. So this is a sample roadmap of how one can start, or how one can aim his career towards uh, cybersecurity. So what people call as a feeder role is nothing but a beginner fresher level job that one would get in any tech company, right? I mean, an FDE would be a feeder role, or a systems engineer, or a systems administrator, and generic roles like that. So you could, I mean, getting into this feeder role is the mainstream way, and it's also the easier way compared to getting into a security engineer role right after college, or right in the beginning of your career. So getting into a feeder role would be the most easiest way. So once you get there, like I said, you could possibly route your contacts, route your interests, all of them towards cybersecurity, start applying what you're doing to that specific purpose. And then at some point, you would actually feel comfortable to shift to another position in your career. And that could be something that is 100% in the field of cybersecurity, as opposed to a feeder role that has to be generic. So those can be things like a cybersecurity engineer, or a cybersecurity analyst, or or you could be part of an ethical hacking team, or again you could go into that management realm of, like a policy management, or a cybersecurity manager, and things like that. And then a mid-level sort of row would be where you start to become a tech lead, right? That's what is usually a mid-level position for any software person. You start to become a tech lead, or you could even become an architect in cybersecurity, where you would actually be planning the entire flow of how your product in that specific company can be secured. And again, you'll be managing people, of course, who are under you. So you'll be basically in charge of the creative side as well. So you won't just be doing so you won't just be following a given plan of how to secure something, or how to, you know, implement some security, but you would actually be doing that creative planning yourself. So that would work. That's what an architect would do in that certain level. And an advanced level, again, in so like every company has, at some point it would start to bifurcate into a management growth path and a tech growth path. The management growth path would go into things that veer off from the tech side, like it would probably end in the level of a vice president or a CEO, but that's not of concern for us. Let's assume that we're talking about the tech growth path. So that would, again, probably at the point of an architect, you'd probably again you'd go into probably a director of cybersecurity, and then uh, nowadays there are a lot of demand. There's a lot of demand for the role of CISO, CISO, which is the Chief Information Security Officer. So that's the C-suite for a cybersecurity person in any big company. And then you could also go into probably a very research oriented role as well, like a research fellow or something like that, where you would be completely into research and you wouldn't be part of development at all. But those kind of roles normally require a PhD and stuff, so that would be like extremely niche. So yeah, uh, and then so these are again, so everything, every sort of every sort of specialization needs to have a certain set of skills on paper and off paper. So again, like I said, the foundations have to be important. Uh, there's no getting around that. You have to be extremely strong in coding. There is no one specific. Like a lot of people usually ask me, is there any specific language that you need to know for cybersecurity? There is no specific language that you need to know for cybersecurity. You have to be strong in your core DSNL roles, and you can picking up a language after that shouldn't be a huge task. But I mean, if I have to answer that question, I would say get your C and C++ really strong, like extremely strong, because that's, I mean, as people say, that's sort of the roots for every other programming languages that came after it. So if you have those two languages strong, I'm pretty sure that you can pick up any other languages quite easily. And so in terms of programming languages, that's one. In terms of scripting, I would say so. Most of the software engineers use Ubuntu or some distro of Linux, right? Uh, so scripting in Bash is something that you just have to be comfortable with. It would just make your life easier, and a lot of things just it would just facilitate in making a lot of things faster and more comfortable for you. Uh, so scripting in Bash or some shell would definitely be a good thing for you, and it would help you. And some people would actually need that as a requirement too. And mathematics, right? So if you, it's not just for going into research. Just in general, if you know a lot of basic concepts in math, it could help you understand a lot of cybersecurity concepts even better instead of just blindly, getting them inside your head. If you actually get these concepts at the core level, you'd be able to get the cybersecurity concepts at the core level as well. So you might be able to tweak around and actually come up with new things that people haven't thought of. And a few of them are number systems and set theory, probability, and so on. And again, cryptography is something for which you would need math, like really strong math. And cryptography is again, it's to do with encrypting information and handling ciphertext and ciphers and so on. So it's basically securing information, right? So to put it simply, so to secure information, you would need to change it somehow. From a plain text, you would have to transform it into a different set of bits and bits and in whichever in whichever notation that you would like it to be transported to wherever you want to transport it to. So so cryptography is again one of the most important parts of cybersecurity that you would have to know at least the basics of in order to get around your work. Networking again is something that is needed for everything inside computer science. You would need networking for, because it would be a part of your work at some point or the other. You can't avoid it. So getting the basics of that, like the TCP, IP protocols, the OSI layer, and how internet works, how website works, how the DNS server works, and so on. So getting a grip of these on a very basic level would definitely help you. And if you have an advanced outlook, that would be much better. And uh, so the last one is basically a hacker's mentality, right? So uh, in any other field of computer science, I would say a textbook knowledge is more than enough. and pushing the envelope is not something that's needed a lot in the other specializations, especially blockchain and machine learning and so on, because things like coming up with new things is taken care of by some other people, so it's taken care of for you. You just have to implement it, right? Again, I'm not talking about the research side, but just development side. But in cybersecurity, it's sort of more vague than that. There are new things coming up every day, and there are new things that you can come up with every day. So you just need to have a mentality to break down things and look for things at places where people haven't thought of to look for. So basically, have a very, very, very curious mindset in order to break down things and check what they are, and just don't be afraid to uh, do something that you might think would be bad. Like to break down a piece of software, check for vulnerabilities, or maybe I don't know, try hacking your neighbor's Wi-Fi, things like that. Like people who push the on envelope like these are the ones who essentially make it to the top of this field, because that's what it takes to get to the top of this field. Continuing, there's a lot of jargon, I would say. So this is something that I've observed personally, and I've also felt it personally, affects personally. There's a lot of jargon in cybersecurity. I mean, there is jargon in pretty much every sort of field, right, out there in academics and also industrial. But in cybersecurity, I would say there is more jargon, and getting used to that and knowing what each abbreviation and each sort of pseudonym, what they all mean, would just make life easier for you. Instead of looking what each one means up, looking up each word or looking up each abbreviation each time when you come across it. Just knowing all that beforehand would help you a lot. It would just speed up the process and make your work, make your understanding much more comfortable and also easier. And like I mentioned before, networking is extremely important. So a few examples actually would be, you could be part of a lot of student chapters. One of the most famous communities in the field of cybersecurity is the OWASP chapter. It's the Open Web Application Security Project. So it's an open source thing. So it's sort of like Toastmasters for cybersecurity, right? So there are a lot of chapters in each part of the world. There'll be a lot of student chapters in a lot of colleges. I'm sure if you look up chapters in your specific location, you could find something in your radius. So just being part of these chapters would help you keep in touch with the field, on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. And also it would help you learn new things that you don't have the time to learn, or you don't have the time to look up. It would just be done for you. So it's just a very easy way of actually getting access to new information and also learning new concepts. And yeah.
Deepthik, sorry to interrupt. Actually,
No.
one of our audience, Mohit, wanted to ask something during the
Yeah,
call.
sure,
He
go ahead.
and yeah, please, Mohit, put forward your quiz that you have for Deepthik.
Yeah, Mohit, please go ahead.
Okay, I guess Mohit is not around with us at this point of time. Sure, no worries. We can proceed
Take it
forward.
up, and yeah, no problem. No problem. All right.
And others as well, please, if you have a query, please feel free to make use of the raise hand feature. Please feel to raise your hand and unmute yourself for getting your queries clarified with Deepthik. And or you can also use the chat option to put forward your queries, and we'll take them as you post it out. Yeah, please go ahead,
Yeah,
Deepthik.
cool. Thanks. So yeah, there are a few more skills that you can gradually build up. So this is once you get both your feet into the field of cybersecurity completely. That's when you would actually start to need all these skills. Otherwise, these skills are really not that important. These skills sit on top of a lot of basic concepts. So you would only need to consider this once you reach that specific level. Few of them are reverse engineering, malware analysis, pen testing, and so on. So these are very, very, very specific to the field of information security. So talking about resources, right? So so to begin with, resources that will actually help you on paper, and by on paper I mean on your resume or on your CV. So these are things that would basically catch the eye of an HR person who's sifting through a lot of resumes and trying to filter out people who he or she would like to get an interview for, right? So these are things that would help uh, sort of help you get filtered through that list. And most of these also actually help you learn things, right? It's not just these are very superficial just for HR people. These also will definitely help you learn a lot of uh, basically help you gather a lot of knowledge in various domains. So when we talk about certifications, so a lot of people would like to have a lot of certifications in their resume and put it up on LinkedIn and so on. But in my personal opinion, there are only handful of certifications that you can actually consider and that might actually be deemed useful. There are a lot of certifications out there that are quite empty-headed, and they just have a lot of hype around them. But the actual fact is that companies don't really care if you have those certifications or not. But some of them are actually worth it, and they're also worth the money that you'll be paying them, because pretty much every big certification. Yeah, Deepanshu, are you saying something?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, please carry on.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, in my opinion, I would say there are two important certifications that could really help you both learn and also help you get sort of spotlight in your resume. One of them is the CompTIA Security Plus. So this is one of the certifications that a beginner would take. It's completely theoretical. You don't have to code or hack or do something like that. Completely theoretical, but again, it covers a lot of aspects in the entire field of cybersecurity, starting from basics, ending with actual things like cryptography and so on. So this is a very beginner level certification that if you are up for a certification, but actually interested in getting a certification, I would suggest you start off with this. There are a lot of alternatives, but I feel that this is one of the best. And to end with a really good certification, so OSCP, so it stands for Offensive Security Certified Professional. So this is something that would help you get a very, very, very strong grip on the offensive side. It's a completely practical examination. It's proctored, and it's a 24 hours exam, right? So it's an exam where you'll have a certain number of systems that you would have to hack into. I'm not sure the number, but yeah, you basically have to hack a minimum number of systems in that time span of 24 hours, and then you would get your certification. And the reason I like the certification is a lot is because this is probably one of the hardest certifications out there. So because there is there is no study material for this. They will just give you a certain set of guiding points, but everything else is up to you. Learning how to do it, and so on and so forth. So and this certification also has no expiry. So that's another good point if you ask me, because a lot of certificates out there have an expiry. So it's basically like you would have to get it renewed, which would again incur some cost, incur some time, which I feel is not worth it. So again, all these certifications, it's not like they would come in handy throughout your career. I would say just use these certifications as a jumping point to something better, and then you really would not need to pay much attention to these certifications. a lot of people out there, like I have seen a lot of people on LinkedIn who just, uh, who just deem it fancy to put a lot of certifications on their byline or on their CV and resume, but it's really not needed. At the end of the day, an interviewer would just be hoping and would be expecting that you have the skills that it takes, than depend on things on paper, right? And then talking about courses, so these are courses that really helped me get a strong footing in cybersecurity. So cryptography by Dan Boneh. So he's a professor in Stanford, and this is a really really brilliant course on cryptography. Again, starts with basics and then helps you get a really really good footing in cryptography, and also a lot of math as well. He covers a lot of math concepts that would actually be helpful. And cybersecurity specialization is a course on Coursera. So it is a consolidated program that involves, I think, around 3 to 4 courses by different professors from from the University of Maryland. This is again a very very useful course that would not only involve math and cryptography, but many more things like just basic theory, basic knowledge on what's out there. It also covers hardware security and so on. And there are a lot of publicly available lectures from a lot of universities. But off the top of my head, I would say the MIT and Stanford lectures are really useful. Uh, Sitting through them and actually taking notes and studying through all those concepts would be immensely helpful for you to get a really strong grounding in almost all concepts in cybersecurity. So resources off paper that would actually make a difference, right? So these are things that would actually help you crack an interview or help you build up your own passion in the field of computer science. So YouTube. So there are a lot of channels on YouTube, a lot of informative channels on YouTube that would actually help you know what's going on. So it's not just that it won't just be like they would teach you things uh, off the bat. They would also talk about things that are actually happening in the real world, and they would actually break down hacks that happened in real life. So Live Overflow, Hackersploit, Hackfy, all these are really good channels in my personal opinion, and they upload videos quite often. And Eli, the computer guy, okay, a lot of people actually don't know that this channel exists, but this channel has been around, I would say, like the past 15 years or more. So he's someone who gets really, really specific on every topic he likes to address. So the videos are like more than an hour long. Sometimes they've been a couple of hours. But any video that you watch of his, I'm pretty sure you would, take away a really, really good understanding of concepts, and it's really good for networks concepts because he's a network guy, if I'm not wrong. And blogs, as you all know, blogs are something that would help you a lot. And these are a few blogs that are focused specifically on cybersecurity. Hacker Known again is sort of medium, but for tech, it's a quite recent blog, I think, and you just get solid tech news that would. So these things not only help you learn concepts, right? These can actually also help you, incite a certain passion or inside a certain interest within yourself that would push you or drive you towards learning even more. So, I mean, again, it's not just learning that would make a difference. It's also the passion inside you and the craving and the curiosity inside you that would actually push you even more. And again, so a lot the pop culture again, it's not something that people talk about, but I would say for me, pop culture has actually helped a lot in building up interest. Uh, so these are just two examples that I took off the top of my head, right? Because if you notice, both of these have something in common. So both of these, so the first one is from the show Silicon Valley, and the second one is from the show Mr. Robot. Both of these basically talk about a simple social engineering hack. So social engineering, again, for the people who don't know about it, is basically exploiting the person as opposed to exploiting the tech. So you would just be getting certain secretive information from the person, sort of manipulate him and coerce him into giving up certain information that would in turn help you break their tech. So that's what social engineering is in a nutshell. So again, pop culture is something that can really help you, but again, you should not go behind things that are extremely unrealistic. These two scenes in these shows are probably the most realistic ones that I've watched, like in the entire world of showbiz, right? Because most of the movies, they really don't show how it's done in real life. It would be a very fancy way of doing it, which is extremely implausible, and people don't do it that way at all. So I would say just take inspiration from things that are realistic, and look out for those things. And if you come across those things while watching a movie, make sure to keep a note of it, and actually look it up. Look up that specific technology on Google, see how it works, and see how it's actually done, even if it's not done in a very realistic way in the show. See, as in look up as to why it's not realistic and how it's actually done in the real world. That would help you build up a lot of passion and a lot of interest, and it would be a really good, sort of a quirky driving force for you to learn new things and help you improve your knowledge. And so again, talking about platforms, like I mentioned before, CTF is a really good platform. Hackathons and a lot of competitions are good platforms too. But CTF is a platform where it's just you are let go free. You can get completely wild with your creativity and your methods and so on. So this specific website, Pond.college, is a really good place to start for CTFs. Like I personally, and a lot of people I know too, uh, there's usually a lot of trouble to kickstart in the world of CTFs, because there's no way of spoon feeding what has to be done, and there's no a specific guide, or there's no textbook knowledge at all as to how to start with CTFs. As I said, it's completely wild, and you can use any method you want in order to successfully finish that challenge. So this is a good website for you to actually get started with it. And the website actually does a good job of explaining what it is, what your goals would be, how to build up skills in order to win CTFs, in order to complete challenges and so on. So that's a really good place to start. And again, around all this will sort of indirectly help you learn actual concepts too, and a lot of programming concepts too, not just theoretical concepts, mainly programming concepts. Another skill to end with is Metasploit, right? So Kali Linux is basically a distro of Linux that was, so again, I think it's all open source if I'm not wrong. So it was created specifically for people in the field of cybersecurity, because it comes with a lot of tools, a lot of pen test tools by default. These tools can be installed manually if you're on Ubuntu, but this distro, it just makes it easier for you, as it comes with every tool installed by default. So you can just play around with all those different tools. Like by tools, I mean Wireshark is a tool that would help you sort of capture packets on your network, and there are a lot of tools for hacking Wi-Fi. So they're basically pre-built sets of code that's written and sort of formed into a program that would help you do things much easier. So Metasploit is one such framework. So it's basically an open source framework that consists of various exploits, various vulnerabilities, various payloads that you can sort of mix and match and play around with it, and see how it works. So it's completely open source. So every code is visible to you inside the code base. Like if you actually go to that folder inside the operating system, you can see every exploits code, every payload's code, and that would help you get an immense set of knowledge on how things are actually done. So that's a really good place to start. And you, like, to start off with, you need not know how it actually works. You can just sort of play around with it on a very surface level and try things out. Like you can actually, set up a Wi-Fi network with the router that you have at home, change it to a certain configuration, and then use a specific tool in that framework to try and get the password of it. So things like that will actually help you, know how things are done, what things are done for, even though you don't know. To start off, you don't need to know how it's done. It's not completely necessary. You can pick that up eventually. But when you see something that's happening, you would, you would get a real driving interest that would, make you want to learn how it's actually been done. So basically, you can be a script kiddie. You can blindly use all the tools, just play around. You need not know how it works, and on a code level, that's something you can pick up at the end. But this is a really good place to start, and also have some fun with all the tools and hacking stuff like that. Okay, now talking about, so I'm assuming most of you are still in college, right? So talking about an academic route of how to actually get into this specific area. So there's a lot of, so I would say in the last 4 to 5 years, a lot of colleges in India and abroad, they've started formulating a curriculum just for cybersecurity. So this happened with machine learning much before, and recently it's also been happening with cybersecurity. So you have a lot of degrees that say master master of science in cybersecurity as opposed to master of science in computer science. So this would you basically be an on-paper credential that you have an extreme specialization in the field of cybersecurity. So, in my opinion, it really wouldn't make a difference if you choose one or the other. I would say go for whichever is easier for you to get. That would be the simplest answer, because at the end of the day, unlike other fields, the field of computer science, and when you sit for an interview for a software role, any role in the field of software, they would only be looking at your skills, right? They wouldn't really care about what is on paper. That would maybe help with the initial roles, sorry, the initial filtering rounds by the HR people, but it would end there. After that, when you actually sit with a person and answer technical questions, it really wouldn't matter. What would matter is if you answer those questions correctly, and if you show enough aptitude for the role that you're going for. As you know, a lot of big companies like Google and Microsoft have waived off even the requirement for a degree in the last couple of years. So that just goes to show that all they're looking for is skills and not blind credentials on paper. And something else that would also help are research internships, right? So again, one question that I'm usually asked is if I should go for a company internship or if I should go for an internship under a professor. So I would say, assuming the ideal condition of you not having decided on whether to go for a master's or whether to go for basically higher studies, or if you want to go for a job in a company. So let's assume that you have around 4 periods of vacation from your second year to your fourth year, or from your first year to your fourth year. You would have much more than that. I would say maintain a fair share of balance between your research internships and your industrial internships. Like if you have 4 vacations, I would say do 2 of them in each, so that you would have a good footing and you would have both feet inside both these areas, and you have a really good understanding, and then you can choose either one. Because and also it would help you because whichever one you choose, they would actually see proper experience in either of those two fields. And publishing papers would also really help, especially if you're going for masters. It's not something that a lot of people talk about, but publishing papers would actually really help. It's more of scut work, I would say, more than you really don't learn a lot by publishing a paper. You would learn much more in doing the actual work before that, like right up until that point. But publishing that paper and putting it in your resume would definitely help a lot if you want to go for research positions in a company, or better yet, masters or a PhD and so on. And open source. So open source coding is something that I think everyone should get into. It's something that everyone has to have a hand in. It's something that would do nothing but help you in coding and open source contribution. So open source coding is not something I've seen in college curriculum, and I feel that's a significant sort of disadvantage to any curriculum. I feel that learning GitHub, learning how Git works, learning how open source works, learning how source control works, all these things are completely imperative to you actually working in a company, because you wouldn't be working alone. Any work or any job that you're a part of would sort of involve you in a much larger team, and you having to collaborate with that team. So open source contribution would help you learn how that's done, like with the help of Git, because Git is what I would say 99% of the people in the field use. Git and GitHub, how writing open source code works, how to commit a code, and how to contribute, how to pull source code, and so on. So one of these platforms that would help you get a good grounding in this open source area is GSOC, right? So GSOC is Google Summer of Code, and this is also a really good credential to have on paper. It's something that would boost up your CV immensely. It's also something that's quite hard to get into. So GSOC usually it comprises of various organizations that submit themselves to the platform, and then in the end you would have to submit a proposal where you have an idea of how something can be improved in one of the organizations. You'd be applying to a certain organization, and your proposal will involve you explaining how you can improve something, and then it's up to them to choose you, and then you get started. It's a 3 month program for which you get paid a really handsome amount as well. So there are only around 4 or 5 organizations inside the subtopic of cybersecurity, but they're really good ones. So Metasploit, the one I mentioned, is one of them. That's part of GSOC. OASP that I mentioned as well is also part of GSOC, and there are more like Honeypot, and there are a few more. So all of these, I mean, basically getting your hands dirty in these kind of open source contributions would help a lot. It would help you learn a lot, and these are things that you absolutely cannot learn just by reading a textbook or reading a book or reading a blog. These are things that you would actually have to do practically, and there's no alternative to that. You have to actually get down to it and code and talk to people and network and contribute code and discuss and brainstorm and so on. It's extremely practical, but it's something that's also extremely necessary. So to conclude, let's talk about building the right mindset, right? So now we've covered a lot of ideal sort of topics and requirements and so on. So in order to facilitate your journey through all this, again, like I mentioned, you would need to have the mindset of a hacker, the ability to think like a hacker and to work like a hacker. Basically, again, break down things and be curious about why things work in a certain way, and basically checking every corner of every piece of code and trying to exploit it and so on. A knack for breaking things apart and basically checking what they do. And then also curiosity to explore uncharted territories, right? So there might be a lot of sort of areas in a certain field where people just haven't thought of even looking there and looking for what the code there does, or looking for possible code that can be built in that area. So trying to explore places like that will definitely help and will definitely open a lot of doors in order to do things that haven't been done before. And tenacity and patience, again, cybersecurity is something that would require you to have a lot of patience. You have to keep trying again and again until you get something done right, because it's all up to the method, right? And there are so many methods in order to do something, but it might just turn out that only one method gives you the right solution or only one method actually helps you break into something. So tenacity and patience, you just have to keep trying again and again, have a lot of determination, and also uh, relentlessly trying out new methods and new things without giving up, and practice. A lot of things, it's really hard for you to get a good grip of right in the beginning. Good example would be bash scripting. You can't mug up commands and expect you to remember them and use them depending on your situation. You would just have to keep practicing a lot of things, and eventually you would get a good hang of it, and you would things like that would actually come to you spontaneously when it's needed. Right in the beginning, I would say it's really hard for you to like. There's no point in cramming up commands or cramming up syntaxes and stuff like that. So this goes for any programming language, if you ask me. Basically, anything that would involve you to get into a practical area, right? Anything that's practical would need a lot of practice, and there's no two ways about it. So practice, practice, practice. It's completely important. All right. So that pretty much sums up everything. Deeptanshu, do you want to take this ahead?
Yeah. Deepthik, probably we can jump onto the Q&A section first. I guess a lot of people have been waiting anxiously for that.
Yeah, cool. Sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah. So guys, everyone present in the audience, please feel free to open up now. Now is the time to put forward all your queries to Deepthik that you want to have. And yeah, make sure you interact and make the complete use of the session by putting forward all your queries and have something tangible to go home with. So yeah, who's gonna go first? Okay, Harshit, you were. I guess you had a query in the beginning of the.
Yes, I would like to ask some questions.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
as we all know that cybersecurity is a necessary critical part of the any software infrastructure or digital infrastructure. So, what are necessary things which one should always learn? Means it should be a prerequisite.
Okay.
You mean prerequisite for securing a system?
No, for any field means you are working in any field, but you should know the basics of cybersecurity to defend yourself.
Yeah. So that's actually a good point. So nowadays, so it doesn't matter if you're in the field of cybersecurity or not. Knowing the basics of if you're writing a piece of code, there are a lot of things that you can actually do to make that code secure. Like from a very basic point of view, like from a very I would say from the compiler level itself, you can do a lot of things that will actually help your code become secure. So I would say in terms of topics that you would need to know is writing secure code is very very important, and knowing the ins and outs of that specific component that you're building. Like let's say you're part of uh, a team that is building a product, right? So you're in charge of a specific component. So basically, independently assessing that component and knowing the ins and outs of that component's architecture and so on thoroughly, and making sure that every part of that component is secure. So if that's done, and if the code that's being used to write every component is also secure, I would say that covers more than 90% of what you need to know in order to make sure that cybersecurity is implemented there. So I would say those are prerequisites.
Yeah,
I
that's
hope I
clear.
answered the question.
Yeah, yes, that's clear. One more question.
Yeah, sure.
It's a very simple from technical side, but how do you locate an IP address which is attacking on your machine? Likewise, we see there are many reports that our friendly neighboring countries have attacks on India.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
we know that there are be attacks from our neighboring countries.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, this would involve the network domain, right? Completely. So if you take, I could give you an example of your local system, right? So you can actually monitor every traffic, basically the entire traffic that's coming in and out of the system. So there are two things, right? One is the port and one is the IP address. So monitoring all the ports and all the IP addresses on your local network should basically give you the entire traffic that's flowing through your network. And if you have access to your router, you'll have much more information. A good tool to start this would be you can look up a tool called Wireshark. It's a tool that's made dedicatedly for this. So just try playing around with that tool. It's called Wireshark. It's used to it's used to monitor traffic and the firewall settings and ports and so on. So again, when you talk about countries attacking, two different nation states in war and all, and so on, it's the same thing, but then it sort of zooms out to a larger scale, right? So every government would have a certain team that's looking to this. And again, if you take into account how our internet is actually being provided, it's being provided by so it's not completely decentralized. It is a very, very centralized system. Your internet service provider is who is the significant player that actually provides you with internet. So again, there is a centralized hub where he can monitor all the traffic that is coming from where he interacts with, and also our traffic as well, between us and the internet service provider. So if you keep zooming out like this on larger scales, at one point of the end of the line would be governments actually monitoring traffic from different nation states. So that's how it would work.
Still, it is means we can track anyone who is still using VPN.
Yeah, so VPN is basically if you talk about encryption, right? So encrypted communication is basically the packets that you send. Like let's say computer A is communicating with computer B, right? The information packets that are sent from computer A to computer B, they're all encrypted, which means you can't tap into it and know what's being communicated, because they're all basically scrambled in information, and you would need some sort of a secret key in order to know the actual information. So VPN is basically half of that. So let's say you're trying to access a website, right? So if you're trying to access a website, your internet service provider can actually know that you're accessing that website, because you're using that internet service provider, and all your traffic would ideally be logged onto their servers. So they will definitely know what websites you're accessing, which websites you're checking into, where you're logging into, basically your entire traffic. When you use a VPN, what happens is half of that is starting to become encrypted. The first half, basically. The second half might still remain non-encrypted, but the first half, and by the first half I mean, so your computer now connects to the VPN. So the VPN is basically another server through which you are trying to access the World Wide Web, right? So you first connect to the VPN. So every request you make after that is routed through the VPN. So now the only person who can so all your internet service provider can monitor now is your traffic between you and the VPN, which is now encrypted, because the point of using a VPN is to make sure that your communication is encrypted. So now it's encrypted. So now no one can tap into it. No one can know what you're doing. So now all your requests are now being routed through the VPN. So basically, if you're trying to access a website like, let's say, google.com, that request would essentially start from your VPN. It wouldn't start from your computer, because you are now connected to a VPN, right? So first the request would go to the VPN, and then from the VPN, that's where it starts looking for the domain name google.com, and then it will try to fetch the IP address and so on. So the first half is basically between you and the VPN. That's completely secure. No one can tap into it. So that's the purpose of a VPN. The second half is basically the VPN might still be trying to communicate with an unencrypted website. Let's say there's a very primitive website that does not use any secure communication. Like let's say it's a random website. Any request that goes from the VPN to that website is still not secure. So the first half is secure. The first half, as in between you and the VPN. Between the VPN and that unsecure website, that is still not secure. So in this specific scenario, the second half is not secure. So that's how that's the basic purpose of using a VPN.
Got it. Yeah, clear.
Cool.
Yeah, could you please suggest me some more like ongoing network security tools right now in industry, other than Metasploit and Wireshark, what we actually use in industries?
I would say, I mean, Wireshark is